Alright, so hey, here I am. I have a drawing that I had started. This is my second day. Right here I'm doing something called crawling, where I'm just working little by little across the whole picture. How I start is I do a broad, rough draft. I just lay out basic shapes, and then I go in more detailed like this, and I go in and I trace out every contour, which is the outside, the line around an object. So I basically draw every shape that I see. Here I am. I'm sitting in the Field Museum, drawing from an actual specimen. This is how I prefer to work. You can work however you'd like, though, with pictures or drawing from life. I like to draw from life. So here I am. Here's the turtle. And I'm just looking up at the subject and drawing what I see on my paper. Here I am from another angle, drawing what I see, and as you can see, I'm working pretty closely to the subject. This is what's called measuring. So I start with, in this case, I started with the head, and I made that a specific size, and you kind of check the width and the height, and you measure that shape to the other shapes in the subject. So I'm checking, like, here I'm measuring how big is that eye, and is it the same as that? So then I'm looking at my drawing, and those two spaces are the same height. So you want to make sure in your drawing the proportions are right. So how big an eye is compared to that neck part, or how big is that flipper compared to that head. So you can use your pencil as a ruler and just mark it off. As you see, I'm holding that pencil, I'm holding it straight out and parallel to the floor. And then I'm measuring on my paper and seeing, is this flipper the same size as his head? And if it is, then I know I've drawn the head right. So you're constantly measuring to double check that your crawling has been going good. And you see that line that goes up and down? That is like a drop-in line. So you can hold your pencil up and down, and you can check things like this middle part lines up to the flipper, or like if you're drawing a person, you could be like the end of the eye drops down to the end of the lips. So it's a way to make sure that your proportions are also going good as well. You can do them horizontally or vertically. Just draw lines at the top of something or the bottom of something, so we make sure that the proportions are right. And it's just kind of a long process. You just keep going. You keep drawing. Here I am just shading to make up the difference, because I'm going to paint this later, but I'm shading it to see, just to differentiate where those dark parts are. If I was going to draw this in pencil, I would later go into that in more detail, but I'm just laying it down for a painting. This is just an underlaying. So I like to work in the Field Museum a lot. There's a lot of specimen that I can work in. I'm based out of Chicago right now. But you can go to any museum, and they've got all sorts of good stuff you can draw, because animals are hard to draw since they move. But in the museum, since they're specimen, they don't move, so you have all the time in the world to start drawing. And then once you get quicker and more familiar with drawing animals, you can then draw them from, say, the zoo, or your own pets at home. And if you, with COVID right now, when we're all staying home, you can draw your pets, or maybe your stuffed animals, or plants are really good because they also don't move. So now I'm in the painting stage. I've sped this up four times faster than it is in real life, because it did take a very long time, and I wanted you guys to see the whole process. So right now I'm just getting the paint out on my palette. I use a limited color palette, which means I don't use a lot of colors, because I like to mix them. Well, I wouldn't say like, but I mix them to get other colors. And a good thing to know when you're mixing colors is to get a browner version of, say, an orange, you're going to mix its complementary color. So orange and blue are complementary, and you mix those two together and you'll get more of a brown. If you keep more orange in it than blue, it'll be a better brown. And then red and green are complements. So you mix those together in equal parts, you'll get a brown. And then purple and yellow are complements. You mix those together, they get a brown. And what you can really do is use a little bit of green and a lot of red to just tone it down, because to do things like setting something behind something, say you've got an object in the background and you don't want it to pop out, you want it to recede, you want it to go back in space, you'll desaturate it. That's what adding the complement is. So say it's a red object and we want it to go back a little bit or darken up. We'll add a little bit of green in our red and that'll send it back. And then in the front you'll be more saturated with your colors. So right now I'm just laying down the tone. There's going to be a lot of layers on top to build up to the turtle's wrinkles, the turtle's spots there on its flipper and then on the top of its head. But right now we're just getting a ground base to start building up on. Right there you can see me mix purple and yellow to get this darker color, this darker yellow. Because a lot of people like to use black to darken up their colors and get their shade colors. But that tends to like gray your colors. Your colors turn more black and you just want them to darken. So it's best to do your shades in its desaturated complement, which means if you're doing a shade of yellow, add purple to your yellow, and then you'll have this darker brown. It may be kind of an ugly color, but once you put it down on there, it'll look real nice. So when I paint, I really like to listen to podcasts and music. My favorite podcast right now is I Know Dino, and it's a dinosaur podcast, and they're the two people who run it. I don't know their names, but you can find it on any podcast thing. They talk through science, science papers about the latest dino discoveries, and it's kind of a nicer way to figure out what's happening in the dino community instead of reading them, because we're so busy, but they read it and tell me what happened, so I really like that. So here I'm doing these spots, and I'm doing them kind of purpley because that's what I see in the picture that I printed off here. But later I decided that I don't like how it's looking, and really in actuality it's not very purple. So later I'm going to change that once that dries and I figure out how to fix that. So if you're not liking how it's turning out at the beginning, that's okay. And sometimes it doesn't really look good until we progress further in the painting. Because a lot of times art starts off not where we want it because it's not finished up, but if you just keep going with it and keep working it, it'll get better and better. And really the first layer even doesn't have to be exactly what you want it to be. Like I'm not really at the color that I like right now, and I just keep working on it, laying over it, mixing new colors as I go, and working towards that color. The first color doesn't have to be the right color. We'll fix it later. Because it's easier to fix something that's wrong than to get it right the first time. It's kind of just a long process. So I'm really thinking about how to get this turtle to look round. I'm shading it with darker colors so it'll look more 3D. And I'm also thinking about the texture. He's a wrinkly guy, so I'm making sure I get those wrinkles in there. So the turtle I'm doing is a loggerhead sea turtle. They live in mostly the Mediterranean, and they're the largest of all hard-shelled turtles. They're named for their massive heads and strong jaws. Their reddish-brown shell is heart-shaped, and their front flippers propel them through the water like wings, and their hind feet stabilize and steer them. While adult males generally weigh about 250 pounds, loggerheads of more than 1,000 pounds have been found. I'm reading this off of the National Geographic website. The loggerhead turtle is considered a keystone species, meaning that other animals in its ecosystem depend on it for survival. These turtles feed on invertebrates whose shells pass through their digestive systems and upon excretion fall back to the bottom of the ocean for other animals to eat as a calcium source. Predators also rely on loggerhead hatchlings for foods, while more than 100 species of animals, including barnacles, crabs, and algae, live on their shells. I've actually drawn some barnacles on this turtle, and I found through another website that there is a loggerhead turtle that was found with more than 100 species on its back. That is on the coloring book page that has been made for this event as well. Hopefully y'all have downloaded that and are working on that as well. But during or after this event, should be a fun coloring sheet. You could even paint it if you want, or you could color it with markers or whatever you have around the house. These highly migratory turtles have an enormous range that encompasses all but the most frigid waters of the world's ocean. They prefer coastal habitats in temperate and subtropical regions, though they often frequent inland water bodies and will travel hundreds of miles to reach them. So these loggerhead sea turtles are primarily carnivores, which means they eat mostly meat, and their strong jaws allow them to crush conch, bivalves, and horseshoe crabs. They also eat jellyfish, shrimp, sponges, fish, and sometimes even seaweed. So since they eat jellyfish, there is something in the ocean right now that look a lot like jellyfish, and they mistake it for food. Plastic bags floating in the ocean look like jellyfish, and turtles like this loggerhead turtle can ingest that, and then, as we know, plastic is not food, and it gets trapped in their digestive system, and it can hurt them. So something we can do to help our turtle friends is to try to limit our use of plastics, our single-use plastics like plastic bags, water bottles, straws. We can try to use reusable totes, reusable straws that are made of silicone, metal, bamboo, paper. Those are all valuable options. And we can also use a reusable bottle as often as we can. I know sometimes it's hard to, we're not in a situation where that's easy to do, but when we can, I think it's really important to help our oceans and our ocean animal friends. Some other threats that are happening to our loggerhead turtles are fishing nets. They can get caught in fishing nets. Sometimes fishing nets are left in the ocean, another source of ocean pollution. If they get caught in fishing nets, logger turtles breathe air, and if they get caught underwater for too long, that is not very good for them. But if we can get our fishing boats and our fishing people, I don't know what they're called, to watch out for that kind of thing and try to develop a way to fish still as efficiently while not hurting animals like the sea turtle. Another interesting thing that I found on this National Geographic website is that climate change is also throwing off the ratio of male and female sea turtles. The temperature of the sand in which turtles are hatched determines their gender and their sex. And as those temperatures rise, more female loggerheads are born. Climate change is also raising sea levels and creating more extreme weather events, which also harm the turtles' coastal habitats. So with a ratio leaning towards more female loggerhead turtles, it's gonna be hard to get more turtles so that they can reproduce and keep going. So yeah, I'm just working on the flipper. And I've made this really nice orange color out of I don't have an orange paint, but I'm using a yellow, a red, and then mixing a little bit of blue in there to tone it down. So it's more of a brownish orange that is more like the turtle's color. I'm just making sure I get all those little cells in its arm, its flipper. Yeah. It's really satisfying to paint all these shapes, and as you can see, I have darker shapes in the bottom, and then I've added a little bit of white to my mixture and a little bit of an ochre color. And ochre is a dull yellow, and I've also added that to it. So I've got the dark ones down at the bottom and then the lighter shapes at the top, and you can see it's starting to look more 3D and more rounded than having just one solid color. So since 1987, the US has required commercial fisheries to use turtle excluder devices that help turtles escape from fishing nets. So there's that thing I was talking about, trying to figure out how to continue to fish and, feed people, but make sure that we're not catching turtles in our nets. And it looks like they've made excluder devices. When these devices are fitted onto the neck of a trawl net, larger animals like turtle bounce off their grid-like bars, while smaller animals like shrimp pass through. So turtles get caught in the shrimping nets a lot. But of course, there's still work to be done, and we should keep pushing and getting legislature to push for further protection of animals like the sea turtle. So I should probably talk about how, what kind of work I do as an artist. Right now I'm just a student, well, not just a student, but I'm a student working to be a scientific illustrator. I also work here at Aeon for Ocean as their scientific illustrator. It's a really nice job and I've been liking it a lot. So as a scientific illustrator, I accurately draw animals, plants. Scientific illustrators could do medical illustration, like drawing people's insides, bones, organs. Be able to educate people about science. It's really just bringing science to life. An art form that, a scientific illustration art form that makes a lot of sense is paleo art. So dinosaurs, we can't get pictures of dinosaurs, right? Because they're not alive any longer. Well, the ancient ones. Of course, birds are still alive, and birds are dinosaurs. But we need someone to make pictures of dinosaurs since we can't take pictures with cameras. So we have to envision what dinosaurs would look like. And that's when a scientific illustrator, paleo artist would come in and work with the scientists and draw the T-Rex. And that's how people would be able to see what would the T-Rex would have looked like with muscle and skin. What would the Brachiosaurus look like? What does the Stegosaurus look like? And that's all thanks to paleo artists and scientific illustrators. They also work with scientists for museums, making exhibitions and painting murals, or doing what I'm doing and painting a loggerhead turtle for a Facebook Live event. We do a lot of things. We can make paintings for magazines like National Geographic. We can make paintings for books. Scientific papers might need a drawing or a painting. Maybe a scientist wants the inside of a bird and to draw the respiratory systems of a bird. What do those look like? That's when a scientific illustrator would come in and draw that for the scientist, and then the scientist would put it in her paper, his book, on their blog, on their website. There's a lot of uses for a scientific illustrator. A lot of times they could work with museums, aquariums, directly with scientists. And a scientific illustrator can focus on biology, plant biology, paleobiology, medical practices, ocean conservation, education, science education. There's a lot of uses, and it's I really like doing it because I really love science, but I really love art too. So it's a really nice way for me to work with both at once. Like here I'm learning about the loggerhead turtle as I'm drawing it, and I get to teach other people too. So here you see I've covered up the purple, and I've covered it with a reddish brown, an orangey brown instead. And now I'm working on the details in the eye. And getting all those wrinkles in with a dark brown. So by now you can see my palette's getting a little messy. However you keep your palette is however you keep your palette. It's up to you. I just like to mix colors as I need them. sometimes I run into trouble when I run out of the color I was using and then I gotta mix more, but stuff happens, you know? You just mix more. Try to get the same color. Oh, I should probably mention what kind of paints I'm using. I'm using what's called gouache. So gouache is spelled Gouache. And the best way to describe it is, if you know what acrylic paint is and watercolor, those are more common paints. It's halfway between both of those. It kind of does, in my own personal opinion, it does everything I want acrylics to do, and then it does everything I want watercolors to do. So it's a nice mixture of the two kind of paints. It gives a nice, it's got a nice opaque. So opaque means not very see-through. Like a baseball is an opaque item. You can't see through a baseball, but a glass is a transparent item. You can see through it. So this is an opaque color. Unless watered down, you could make it opaque. As you saw in the beginning, I was using, not opaque, you could make it transparent. So I was using a more transparent form just by adding water. Here, right here, I'm using it transparently by adding a lot of water. Perfect timing. You may have noticed I switched where the light was in the middle of the video so that you could better see the painting happening. So you see, this is where I'm using that really desaturated brown made from orange and blue. It's the same color I used in the front flipper, but I put a lot more blue in it, so it's a lot darker, but it's still an orangey color. There's more orange than brown, but it's, more orange than blue. But it's a lot darker, so you can see that's going back into the background. But you don't want to go too dark, because you don't want it to flatten. If it's too dark, like right now, I'm painting that way too dark. I'm gonna lighten it up. But I noticed, oh, that's too dark, because when it's super dark, super flat, it'll come back to the front of the painting. Because basically, we're trying to make something 2D look 3D. So there's a lot of tips and tricks we gotta know to fix that. So I'm mixing up I'll go back once that's dry. Once the paint is dry, I'll go back over it with a lighter color so it doesn't pop back front. We're gonna put it back in space. Because you want it to be dark, but not too dark. I don't know how else to describe it. Because you want like the darkest in the front, you want it like dark and crisp in the front spaces that you want to stand out, and then like lighter and smoother in the back. That's called atmospheric perspective, where it's like more desaturated and more out of focus, like softer in the back. Because those things will fall back, and then the crisp stuff will come forward. I decided to pre-record the painting process so that you could see it all. If I only did 30 minutes of painting live, probably wouldn't see too much. Right now would be 30 minutes through the program, and I'd probably only have the head done, because should probably figure out how long this painting took me to do, but I started working at 10. I finished up around 8. Of course, I had to break for lunch, and the camera battery died a few times. You know what, I'm gonna go check how long it took. I'll let you know. So I'll be right back. All right. Look back at all my video footage and figured out that it was about 3 hours and 20 minutes active time working on the painting. So I wanted everyone to be able to see the finished product instead of just a part of it. So you've probably seen me painting upside down or painting from the side, and it's just the way my hand works. Sometimes it's easier for me to do a certain shape and get a nice crisp line from a different angle. So it's totally okay to, I would flip it around, the paper. I'd flip the paper around, but it's taped down since I'm working with a watercolor. We tape it down so it doesn't get all bent from all the water that is placed onto the paper. So right now I'm toning the shell of the Loggerhead turtle, and I'm toning it blue as opposed to yellow that I did last time, because that blue will be able to work with the brown and just kind of desaturate it. Well, the orangish brown I'm putting on top to make it that brown of the Loggerhead turtle. So it's just a really thin, downed with a lot of water, blue gouache. You could kind of mix it on the paper. You can see me, I add it and then I mix it with a little water. And I did that because my palette did not have enough room, but it works just fine. Now I'm going in with that yellow ochre. It's a really beautiful color, and I put a little bit of red in it to make it a little bit closer to an orange color. And I'm putting it in between all the cells on the back of the turtle. A lot of people wonder about how I got so good at painting and doing art and drawing. And short answer, practice and time. I was interested in art as a small kid, like in preschool. I was like, I want to be an artist when I grow up. There was a time in 5th grade where I wanted to be a paleontologist, but as a scientific illustrator, that's a mix of both, because I'm hoping to draw dinosaurs one day. So it's because you don't have to have been interested in art as a kid to get better at art and pursue art. You just have to keep in mind that it's it takes practice. It's not all raw talent. There's a lot of practice that goes into becoming an artist, a lot of time, a lot of training. Sometimes people have, some predispositions to things. Like, no matter how hard I try, I'm not an English person, and I am not going to be able to do writing. But that's okay. But it's not all raw talent. You can always learn art. Because a lot of times people just, they start and then they go, oh, this doesn't look as good as this person's. But you just haven't been drawing as long as that person. You just gotta keep going. And sometimes it's just the drawing that needs a little more time. Keep going with that same drawing and just keep working on it. Because it's not a art doesn't take 2 seconds. This painting itself took 3 hours, and with breaks included, it was a little bit longer, calendared, in the span of a day. It took me about a day to get the painting, but focusing all of my energy on it. And then the drawing underneath it, that took 2 visits. It took 2 days to do the underdrawing. I like to take breaks from my art and come back to it with fresh eyes later. So I'll get the rough sketch, I'll draw that, and then I'll take a break and I'll do other stuff in life. And then I'll come back and I'll look at it again, and then I'll look at the same specimen and I'll see something different the next day. And I'm like, oh, I didn't see that this say this horn is a little bit higher than I actually put it. So it's always nice to come back the next day. So, but if you're really interested in pursuing art, or just as a career or just as a hobby, just keep going. Take as many classes as you can find. You can do classes online maybe now because of COVID. You can find some online stuff to do, or just feel it out and practice. Find new mediums. Whatever you have around the house, you could just start with that and just keep making with that, experimenting, playing with it, seeing what happens if I put this color over that color, or what if I you could set up a still life, which is a collection of objects, and then you draw them. You could put a cup and a ball, maybe your favorite things, set them up, and then try drawing them, and just do a little bit each day and keep going. And something to keep in mind is that an artist, for every 1 good drawing that they do, they'll do 100 bad. There's still times when I make a piece and it doesn't look good, but that's fine. That's part of being an artist, accepting that sometimes things don't work out. There's even a process I tried on this painting that I didn't like, and I just worked over it. It's the paper towel. I don't know when that's going to be showing up. I think later in the video, but I'm sure you could paint with a paper towel in other matters, but for this turtle it wasn't working. I was trying to make a texture, but I found that if I just painted the texture and took that time to paint it, it would look better. And we learn stuff like that through the process. As you can see, my water cup was a little bit too close to my my paper, so I've got a few drips on the background, but we can fix that either by painting the background. For this piece, I'm actually going to be transferring it into the digital realm, so I'm going to be photographing it and then removing the background entirely so it's transparent. So I'm not too worried about those drops back there. I'll be taking the background out so that this turtle can be a turtle and go anywhere. Now, he does not have, I didn't draw back flippers on this turtle because, as you can see in my specimen, I could not see them, and I didn't want to make up flippers that we couldn't see, and we probably can't see him because he's on a hill. Or she, I'm not sure if this turtle is male or female, but the turtle is displayed on the beach. So in that situation, it could most likely be a female to be laying her eggs. So as you can see, I put some snacks there, and I'm eating while I'm working, listening to music as well. That's the fun thing about art, is you can be working, at your job, and you could wear whatever you want. There's no dress code to your office, and you can snack. I've got everything pretzel crisps. They're very good. I'm just kind of eating and painting. So. And yes, they're on my table, but I sanitize it pretty often. And I'm not working with anything toxic. If I was working with oil paint, I should probably get a plate. But there's nothing toxic in gouache and water. So yeah, now I'm just working on getting the 3D and the roundness of the turtle shell. I'm looking at the picture, I'm seeing where it's lighter, and I'm going to be working on it later, but as you can see, I've kind of I've blocked out the shapes a little bit too straight. There's not a lot of straight lines in nature. Even if they look a little bit straight, they're not perfectly straight. So I'll be fixing that up later once that base dries, and I'll mix it into the more yellow lines in between the turtle cells on the shell. If you know the name, leave it in the Facebook comments. I'd love to know the name of those segments on the turtle shell. Here's that paper towel thing that I was telling you about that I tried and I didn't really like it. So right now I'm mixing up a lot of the reddish, the desaturated red, and I'm trying to texture it, but it's looking it's not looking right. And that's probably because in this situation it's best to go and texture it by hand instead of a quick method. I'll go back over it and work on top of that texture. And here too, it was getting a little too streaky, so I smoothed it out. Art's all about trying something, looking at it, you know, if it doesn't look right, just go over and fix it. Because it's highly unlikely that you'll get it right the first time. Here's what I was saying about fixing up those straight lines. I'm taking that yellow ochre and I'm just bringing it into the darker part of the cell to blend the two together, make them less boxy and more organic. We'll be following up this video with the lottery drawing and with a 10-minute Q&A where you can put in the Facebook comments. Hopefully I'll be able to see that. I think I will. So in the comments on the Facebook Live, you can put your questions and I can see if I haven't answered any. If I haven't answered any questions you still might have, just drop them in the comments and I will answer that. So I'll doing a 10-minute Q&A. Oh, I should probably tell you what my palette is. My palette is simply a piece of glass. I like it the best because it's easy to wash. I don't use my oil paints on it, but I use my acrylics and my gouaches on the glass. And what that is helpful for is you just kind of, with the acrylic, you just kind of soak it, and the acrylic does not adhere to the glass and it'll come off in big chunks. Because when acrylic dries, it's dry. It's now a plastic chunk. But gouache is water-based, so it comes off and it washes off. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it just turns it into it washes off with the water by being water, you know. Because a lot of times you gotta think about your sinks. You cannot send acrylic paint down the sink; it will clog your sinks. The best way to, even acrylic paint water, you don't want to send that down your sinks. I honestly do sometimes, but because a little is not gonna kill it. But if you're constantly putting paint down the sink, you're gonna clog the pipes. The best way to get rid of acrylic water is to leave it to dry. The water will evaporate and leave the acrylic behind, and you just gotta wait for that water to dry. But, so yeah, here, that's finished. Hold on. Okay. So yeah, so water-based like gouache and watercolor, that's okay to go down the sink since it's a water-based paint. Inks are fine too, but anything else should not go down the sinks. So yeah, here it is finished. I'm gonna let you look at it. So now we'll head to our Q&A.